Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to you, Khifir, Prime Minister, Mr. Washington, and support staff, as well as my colleagues here, those listening and viewing. I was going to reserve the majority of my questions for the second round, which I probably will hold on to, but I do want to say a couple things because I listened quite intently to the opening statement of the Prime Minister that came in here, and the Prime Minister talks about not throwing blame, not throwing blame the challenges that exist, but I disagree because I think that you have to look at why we are here in the first place with GEBE. It's not about throwing blame on that side of the aisle. No, it's about looking at how we got here. And I hope that the people that I spoke to over the weekend are tuning into this, are gonna be guided, directed to actually come look at this video, because what has happened over the years, and this is from an external auditor perspective, as well as an inside perspective of an employee of GEBE. What has happened over the years is you have had management that has literally been puppeted by a supervisory board of directors. You have had a supervisory board of directors that has been puppeted by a government, and sometimes they like to change positions. And what happens in that is when they start interfering with government-related companies, then you feel this pressure as management of a company to adhere to what they're telling you or to listen to them because they're puppeting you. So you feel this pressure of doing what they tell you because there's this sword hanging over your head that if you don't do what I tell you, I'm gonna fire you. And that has happened from back in the day when money was taken out of the water company all up until today. You have had board members trying to literally save the company. You have had board members try to literally destroy the company. And this has all happened under the direction of governments that have interfered. So you have to know so that we can avoid this, because right now, there's no way that you can paint this picture. It's not pretty. It is not easy. What has happened is the destruction of literally the last company that was doing okay. After Hurricane Irma, we were considering, and I am going to be very open about it, GEBE was considering at the time whether or not they would take the assistance of the World Bank. Do you know one of the requirements from the World Bank was to dismiss about 30% of the staff? And there was no way that we could allow that, because what would have happened was if you had dismissed 30% of the staff after hurricane, I don't think they put it in their head that they would then become the financial burden of the government that actually owns the company. So when people are talking about dismissing staff, when they're talking about finding companies like GEBE, when you find them, they're still government related. So at the end of the day, the person who has to take the responsibility is the government. And that's really what I want to get out of this point today before I pose any questions, is what are we going to do about not interfering and not destroying the companies? Because at the end of the day, to me, it all boils down to government interference, because government is who places the people on the supervisory board of directors, and they in turn overstep. They overstep their authority, because it's because of them that decisions were not taken to actually upgrade a system that was exposed. That is the point that I'm trying to say here today. And so we can be nice and say kumbaya and say, oh, well, let's not throw blame. You need to know. You need to know why we are here, why we are in this position today, and never, ever repeat it again. With that being said, especially with the story I just gave about what happened after Hurricane Irma, what I would like to know is what assurances do we have that staff isn't going to be made redundant? What assurances do we have that GEBE is going to keep on all of their staff? Because every time I come up here, my questions are based from a financial perspective. Every time I come up here for budget debate and I ask about government-related companies, I get fluffy answers. I never get an answer that gives me any assurance. And then what happens a couple weeks ago is you see or you read a nice article from a company like Tell Them saying, we're going to ask people for early retirement. Basically, what it tells me as an external auditor is that we have to make people redundant because we're not doing well financially. So with that being said, I want to know, given all of the challenges that the Prime Minister just mentioned, what is being done to ensure that all those employees of GEBE that have been working overtime with the assistance of the abundance of consultants that are in, What assurances do I have today that they are going to be okay? Because if the World Bank years ago could say 30% of the staff has to go after a natural disaster like Hurricane Irma, I want to know today, after the disaster that was created by government interference, what is being done to ensure that those employees at GEBE are not going to be given early retirement and they're not going to be made redundant? Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.